Chapter 9 Thinking and Language, Modules 27 to 28. A photo shows 5 ethnically diverse students standing outdoors on a college campus and laughing. They carry backpacks and notebooks. Other students are blurred in the background. Module 27 Thinking. Concepts. Problem solving, strategies and obstacles. Forming good and bad decisions and judgments. Thinking critically about the fear factor. Thinking creatively. Do other species share our cognitive skills? Module 28 Language and Thought. Language structure. Language acquisition and development. The brain and language. Thinking and language. Do other species have language? Throughout history, we humans have both celebrated our wisdom and bemoaned our foolishness. Shakespeare's Hamlet extolled the human species as noble in reason, infinite in faculties, in apprehension how like a god. But the poet T.S. Eliot was struck by the hollow man. Headpiece filled with straw. Throughout this text, we likewise marvel at both our abilities and our errors. We study the human brain, 3 pounds of tissue the size of a head of lettuce, yet containing staggeringly complex circuitry. We appreciate the amazing abilities of newborns. We marvel at our visual system, which converts physical stimuli into nerve impulses, distributes them for parallel processing, and reassembles them into colorful perceptions. We ponder our memory's enormous capacity, and the ease with which our 2-track mind processes information, with and without our awareness. Little wonder that our species has had the collective genius to invent the camera, the car, and the computer, to unlock the atom and modify our genetic code, to travel out to space and into our brain's depths. Yet we also see that in some other ways, we are less than noble in reason. Our species is kin to the other animals, influenced by the same principles that produce learning in rats and pigeons. We note that we not always wise humans are easily deceived by perceptual illusions, misinformation, and false memories. In modules 27 and 28, we encounter further instances of these 2 aspects of the human condition, the rational and the irrational. We will first consider thinking, how we use and sometimes ignore or misuse information about the world around us, module 27. And we will look at our gift for language and consider how and why it develops, module 28. Finally, we will reflect on how deserving we are of our species name, Homo sapiens, wise human. Module 27, Thinking. How do we use and sometimes ignore or misuse information about the world around us as we solve problems, make judgments, and find creative solutions? Do other species share our cognitive skills? Concepts. Learning objective question LOQ 27-1. What are cognition and metacognition, and what are the functions of concepts? Psychologists who study cognition focus on the mental activities associated with thinking, knowing, remembering, and communicating information. One of these activities is metacognition. Metacognition is cognition about cognition, or thinking about our thinking. Students who use metacognition, who monitor and evaluate their learning, perform better academically, DeBoer et al., 2018. To improve your grades, it helps to figure out what you don't know. The learning curve adaptive quizzing available with this text can help. At a basic level, we form concepts, mental groupings of similar objects, events, ideas, or people. The concept chair includes many items: a baby's high chair, a reclining chair, and a dentist's chair, all for sitting. Concepts simplify our thinking. Imagine life without them. We could not ask a child to throw the ball because there would be no concept of throw or ball. We could not say I want to earn money because people aren't born with a concept of earn or money. Concepts, such as ball and money, give us much information with little cognitive effort. A cartoon shows a man standing and holding one empty chair in front of 11 different types of empty chairs. He says, "Attention, everyone. I'd like to introduce the newest member of our family." We often form our concepts by developing a prototype, a mental image or best example of a category. Ross, 1978. People more quickly agree that a crow is a bird than that a penguin is a bird. For most of us, the crow is the birdier bird, it more closely resembles our bird prototype. When something closely matches our prototype of a concept, we more readily recognize it as an example of the concept. When we categorize people, we mentally shift them toward our category prototypes. Such was the experience of Belgian students who viewed ethnically blended faces. When viewing a blended face in which 70% of the features were prototypically white and 30% were Asian, the students categorized the face as white, figure 27.1. Later, as their memory shifted toward the white prototype, they were more likely to remember an 80% white face than the 70% white face they had actually seen. Cornet et al., 2004. Likewise, if shown a 70% Asian face, they later remembered a more prototypically Asian face. So, too, with gender, people who viewed 70% male faces later misremembered them as even more prototypically male. Ward et al., 2005. An illustration shows 9 human faces with the percent of white and Asian facial features indicated below each face. Figure 27.1. Categorizing faces influences recollection. Shown a face that was 70% white, people tended to classify the person as white and to recollect the face as more white than it was. Recreation of experiment courtesy of Olivier Cornet. Follow link for extended description of figure 27.1. Categorizing faces influences recollection. Move away from our prototypes, and category boundaries may blur. Is a tomato a fruit? Is a 17-year-old a girl or a woman? Is a whale a fish or a mammal? Because a whale fails to match our mammal prototype, we are slower to recognize it as a mammal. Similarly, when symptoms don't fit one of our disease prototypes, we are slow to perceive an illness. Bishop, 1991. People whose heart attack symptoms, shortness of breath, exhaustion, a dull weight in the chest, don't match their heart attack prototype, sharp chest pain, may not seek help. And when behaviors don't fit our discrimination prototypes, of white against black, men against women, young against old, we often fail to notice prejudice. People more easily detect men's prejudice against women than women's prejudice against men or women's prejudice against other women. Cunningham et al., 2009, Inman and Barron, 1996. Although concepts speed and guide our thinking, they don't always make us wise. Problem solving, strategies and obstacles. LOQ 27-2. What cognitive strategies assist our problem solving, and what obstacles hinder it? One tribute to our rationality is our problem solving skill. What's the best route around this traffic jam? How should we handle a friend's criticism? How, without our keys, can we get into the house? Some problems we solve through trial and error. Thomas Edison tried thousands of light bulb filaments before stumbling upon one that worked. For other problems, we use algorithms, step-by-step procedures that guarantee a solution. But step-by-step algorithms can be laborious and exasperating. To find a word using the 10 letters in Sployakig, for example, you could try each letter in each of the 10 positions 907,200 permutations in all. Rather than give you a computing brain the size of a beach ball, nature resorts to heuristics, simpler thinking strategies. Thus, you might reduce the number of options in the Sployakig example by grouping letters that often appear together, ch and gy, and excluding rare letter combinations, such as yy. By using heuristics and then applying trial and error, you may hit on the answer. Have you guessed it? 1. Sometimes, we puzzle over a problem and the pieces suddenly fall together in a flash of insight. An abrupt, true-seeming, and often satisfying solution. Topolinsky and Reber, 2010, Web et 2019. 10-year-old Johnny Appleton had one of these aha moments and solved a problem that had stumped construction workers: how to rescue a young robin from a narrow 30-inch deep hole in a cement block wall. The child's solution: slowly pour in sand, giving the bird enough time to keep its feet on top of the constantly rising pile. Ruchless, 1990. Insights aren't always perfect, but they often lead to correct solutions. Dainek and Salvi, 2020. What happens in the brain when people experience an aha moment? Brain scans show bursts of activity associated with sudden flashes of insight. Kaunios and Beeman, 2014. In one study, researchers asked people to think of a word that forms a compound word or phrase with each of 3 other words in a set, such as pine, crab, and sauce, and to press a button to sound a bell when they knew the answer. Need a hint? The word is a fruit. Point 2, a sudden aha insight led to about half the solutions. Before the aha moment, the problem solver's frontal lobes, involved in focusing attention, were active. At the instant of discovery, there was a burst of activity in the right temporal lobe, just above the ear. Figure 27.2. A computer-generated image of a human brain shows electrodes on the brain as red dots and the right temporal lobe on the back right side of the head highlighted. Figure 27.2. The aha moment: a burst of right temporal lobe activity accompanied insight solutions to word problems. Young Beeman et al., 2004. The red dots designate EEG electrodes. The light gray lines show the distribution of high-frequency activity accompanying insight. The insight-related activity is centered in the right temporal lobe, yellow area. Insight often strikes suddenly, creating a happy sense of satisfaction. Knoblich and Erlinger, 2006, Metcalf, 1986. When the answer pops into mind, apple, we feel a happy sense of satisfaction. The joy of a joke may similarly lie in our sudden comprehension of an unexpected ending or a double meaning, as aha becomes haha when a clock is hungry, it goes back 4 seconds, or the only thing flat earthers fear is fear itself. The Grim Reaper also strikes with a surprise ending: you don't need a parachute to skydive. You only need a parachute to skydive twice. Insightful as we are, other cognitive tendencies may lead us astray. We seek news that not only informs us but also affirms us. Confirmation bias, for example, leads us to seek evidence for our ideas more eagerly than we seek evidence against them. Clayman and Ha, 1987, Skov and Sherman, 1986. In a classic study, Peter Wason, 1960, gave British university students a set of 3 numbers, 2-4-6, and told them the series was based on a rule. Their task was to guess the rule. It was simple: any 3 ascending numbers. Before submitting answers, students generated their own 3 number sets, and Wason told them whether their sets conformed to his rule. Once certain they had the rule, they could announce it. The result: most students formed a wrong idea, maybe it's counting by 2s, and then searched only for confirming evidence, by testing June 8, 10, 100-102-104, and so forth. Seldom right but never in doubt. A cartoon shows 2 counters, one for unpleasant truths and the other for comforting lies. There are no people in the unpleasant truths line. The person sitting at the unpleasant truths counter watches the people in a long queue at the counter for comforting lies. The human understanding, when any proposition has been once laid down, forces everything else to add fresh support and confirmation. Francis Bacon, Novum Organum, 1620. In real life, having formed a belief that people can, or cannot, change their sexual orientation, that gun control fails, or does not fail, to save lives we prefer information that supports our belief. And once we get hung up on an incorrect view of a problem, it's hard to approach it from a different angle. This obstacle to problem solving is called fixation, an inability to come to a fresh perspective. See if fixation prevents you from solving the matchstick problem in Figure 27.3. For the solution, see Figure 27.4. A photo shows 6 matchsticks. Figure 27.3 The matchstick problem. How would you arrange 6 matches to form 4 equilateral triangles? A prime example of fixation is mental set, our tendency to approach a problem with the mindset of what has worked for us previously. Indeed, solutions that worked in the past often do work on new problems. Consider. Given the sequence OTTF -- what are the final 3 letters? Most people have difficulty recognizing that the 3 final letters are F, IV, S, 9, and S, even. But solving this problem may make the next one easier. Given the sequence JFMA -- what are the final 3 letters? If you don't get this one, ask yourself what month it is. As a perceptual set predisposes what we perceive, a mental set predisposes how we think. Sometimes this can be an obstacle to problem solving, as when our mental set from our past experiences with matchsticks predisposes us to arrange them in 2 dimensions. An illustration shows 6 matchsticks forming a 3-dimensional pyramid. Figure 27.4 Solution to the matchstick problem. To solve this problem, you must view it from a new perspective, breaking the fixation of limiting solutions to 2 dimensions. Forming good and bad decisions and judgments. LOQ 27-3. What is intuition, and how can the representativeness and availability heuristics influence our decisions and judgments? When making each day's hundreds of judgments and decisions, should I take a jacket? Can I trust this person? Is that a friendly dog? We seldom take the time and effort to reason systematically. We follow our intuition, our fast, automatic, unreasoned feelings and thoughts. After interviewing policymakers in government, business, and education, social psychologist Irving Janis, 1986, concluded that they often do not use a reflective problem-solving approach. How do they usually arrive at their decisions? If you ask, they are likely to tell you, they do it mostly by the seat of their pants. 2 quick but risky shortcuts. When we need to make snap judgments, heuristics enable quick thinking that often serves us well. Geigerenzer, 2015. But as cognitive psychologists Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman, 1974, showed, some intuitive mental shortcuts, the representativeness and availability heuristics, can lead even the smartest people into dumb decisions. A portrait shows Amos Tversky. In creating these problems, we didn't set out to fool people. All our problems fooled us, too. Amos Tversky, 1985. A photo shows Daniel Kahneman. Intuitive thinking is fine most of the time. But sometimes that habit of mind gets us in trouble. Daniel Kahneman, 2005. Few would have predicted Tversky and Kahneman's becoming friends and collaborators. Lewis, 2016, Sunstein and Thaler, 2016. When they met, Tversky was a war hero with a confident swagger who studied decision-making, Kahneman was a chronic worrier who studied vision. Setting aside their differences, Tversky and Kahneman would sequester themselves in a small seminar room, where they argued, laughed, and ultimately changed the way that people view thinking and decision-making. Dean and Ordoleva, 2019. Their joint efforts earned the ultimate award, a 2002 Nobel Prize. Sadly, only Kahneman was alive to receive the honor. As Kahneman wrote in a vignette for my DM social psychology text, Amos and I shared the wonder of together owning a goose that could lay golden eggs, a joint mind that was better than our separate minds. The representativeness heuristic. To judge the likelihood of something by intuitively comparing it to particular prototypes is to use the representativeness heuristic. Imagine someone who is short, slim, and likes to read poetry. Is this person more likely to be an Ivy League University English professor or a truck driver? Nisbet and Ross, 1980. Many people guess English professor because the person better fits their prototype of professor than of truck driver. In doing so, they fail to consider the base rate number of Ivy League English professors, fewer than 400, and truck drivers, 3.5 million in the United States alone. Instead, they recall situations that confirm their professor prototype, Bordallo et al., 2021. Thus, even if the description is 50 times more typical of English professors than of truck drivers, the fact that there are about 7,000 times more truck drivers means that the poetry reader is many times more likely to be a truck driver. Some prototypes have social consequences. One mother of 2 black and 3 white teens asked other parents, "Do store personnel follow your children when they are picking out their Gatorade flavors?" "They didn't follow my white kids." "When your kids trick or treat dressed as a ninja and a clown, do they get asked who they are with and where they live, door after door?" "My white kids didn't get asked." Roper, 2016. If people have a prototype, a stereotype of delinquent black teens, they may unconsciously use the representativeness heuristic when judging individuals. The result is racial bias. Kahneman and his colleagues and students have changed the way we think about the way people think. American Psychological Association President Sharon Brem, 2007. The availability heuristic. The availability heuristic operates when we evaluate the commonality of an event based on its mental availability. Anything that makes information pop into mind, its vividness, recency, or distinctiveness can make it seem commonplace. Exceptional happenings may, therefore, seem typical. Watching a horrific terrorist beheading online implants a fear of global terrorism that lingers for 2 or more years, Redmond et al., 2019. Sometimes photos say, of terrified children separated from their parents at the U.S. border, or of the mother of 7 children being appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court, can change thinking for years. As climate change has become more vividly associated with extreme weather, fires, floods, and hurricanes, public concern has risen. For worse or for better, the incidents that we see often overwhelm the larger realities we don't see. The availability heuristic distorts our judgments of risks. Non-stop news coverage of the dangerous COVID-19 pandemic distorted young people's judgments of how COVID-19 might affect them. Asked whether they were worried about their health during the COVID-19 pandemic, younger, ages 18 to 29, respondents reported equal levels of worry as older respondents, ages 65 and older, Rothwell, 2020. Yet Americans aged 18 to 29 were 180 times less likely to die from COVID-19 than were Americans aged 65 and older, CDC, 2021. Younger adults were nonetheless well advised to protect themselves from contracting and spreading the virus to others. The bottom line, we often fear the wrong things. See Thinking Critically About the Fear Factor. LOQ 27-4. What factors exaggerate our fear of unlikely events? An infographic titled, Thinking Critically About the Fear Factor, shows different statistics and reasons related to fear. Follow link for extended description of fear factor. Don't believe everything you think. Bumper sticker. The lack of available images of a future climate change disaster, a climate crisis described by scientists as Armageddon in slow motion, has left some people unconcerned. Moreover, climate beliefs can shift with the day's hot or cold weather, which, though more cognitively available, tells us zilch about long-term planetary trends. Egan and Mullen, 2012, Kaufman et al., 2017, Zabel et al., 2014. As Stephen Colbert, 2014, tweeted, "Global warming isn't real because it was cold today." Also great news, world hunger is over because I just ate. A cartoon shows a man and woman walking together in a park. The woman says, "Don't let this beautiful weather fool you into thinking everything's fine." To offer a vivid depiction of climate crisis, Caltech scientists created and continue to update an interactive map of global temperatures since 1884, see tinyurl.com/tempchange. Over 40 nations have sought to harness the positive power of vivid, memorable images by putting eye-catching warnings and graphic photos on cigarette packages. Riordan, 2013. This campaign has worked because we reason emotionally. Huang et al., 2013. In 2015, a viral photo of a Syrian child lying dead on a beach had massive impact. Red Cross donations to Syrian refugees were 55 times greater in response to that photo than in response to psychically numbing statistics describing the hundreds of thousands of other refugee deaths. Slovak et al., 2017. Dramatic incidents make us gasp, 4 deaths, probabilities we barely grasp, per million. It's so easy to scare people with a horrific happening and then harder to unscare them with representative data. Ask yourself, how has your family managed risk related to COVID-19? Have some of your fears been excessive, or have you not feared enough? How have heuristics influenced your thinking? Retrieval practice. Answers in Appendix E. Overconfidence. LOQ 27-5. How are our decisions and judgments affected by overconfidence, belief, perseverance, and framing? Sometimes we are more confident than correct. When answering factual questions, such as is absinthe a liquor or a precious stone, only 60% of people in one study answered correctly. It's a licorice-flavored liqueur. Yet those answering felt, on average, 75% confident. Fischhoff et al., 1977. This tendency to overestimate the accuracy of our knowledge and judgments is overconfidence. It is overconfidence that drives stockbrokers and investment managers to market their ability to outperform stock market averages which, as a group, they cannot do. Maukiel, 2016. And it is overconfidence that so often leads us to succumb to a planning fallacy. Zauberman and Lynch, 2005. Students and others often expect to finish assignments ahead of schedule. Bueller et al., 1994, 2002. In fact, such projects generally take about twice the predicted time. Anticipating how much more time we will have next month, we happily accept invitations. And believing we'll surely have more money next year, we take out loans or buy on credit. A photo shows a woman smiling and reading the textbook titled, Psychology. Predict your own behavior. When will you finish reading this module? Hofstadter's law, it always takes longer than you expect, even when you take into account Hofstadter's law. Douglas Hofstadter, Gödel, Escher, Bach, The Eternal Golden Braid, 1979. Overconfidence. The bias that Kahneman, 2015, if given a magic wand, would most like to eliminate affects life or death decisions. History is full of leaders who, when faced with potential war, were more confident than correct. On December 4, 1941, U.S. Secretary of the Navy Frank Knox said, "Whatever happens, the U.S. Navy is not going to be caught napping." Warren, 2019. 3 days later, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, killing more than 2,300 U.S. service members. In politics, overconfidence feeds extreme political views. In medicine, overconfidence can lead to incorrect diagnoses, Sapasnik et al., 2016. One research team tested 743 U.S. federal intelligence analysts' ability to predict future events, predictions that typically are overconfident. Those whose predictions most often failed tended to be inflexible and closed-minded, Mellers et al., 2015. A cartoon shows a man and woman sitting opposite to each other at a table and drinking wine. The woman looks irritated, as the man says, "Let me interrupt your experience with my confidence." Nevertheless, overconfidence sometimes has adaptive value. Believing that their decisions are right and they have time to spare, self-confident people tend to live more happily. They make tough decisions more easily, and they seem competent, Anderson et al., 2012. Given prompt and clear feedback, we can also learn to be more realistic about the accuracy of our judgments, Fischhoff, 1982. The wisdom to know when we know a thing and when we do not is born of experience. When you know a thing, to hold that you know it, and when you do not know a thing, to allow that you do not know it, this is knowledge. Confucius, 551 to 479 BCE, Analects. Belief perseverance. Our overconfidence is startling. Equally so is our belief perseverance, our tendency to stick to our beliefs, even when faced with evidence that disproves them. A classic study of belief perseverance engaged people with opposing views of capital punishment, Lord et al., 1979. After studying two supposedly new research findings, one supporting and the other refuting the claim that the death penalty deters crime, each side was more impressed by the study supporting its own beliefs. And each readily disputed the other study. Thus, showing the pro and anti-capital punishment groups the same mixed evidence actually increased their disagreement. Rather than using evidence to draw conclusions, they used their conclusions to assess evidence, a phenomenon also known as motivated reasoning. In other studies and in everyday life, people have similarly welcomed belief-supportive logic and evidence about climate change, same-sex marriage, or politics while discounting challenging evidence, Friesen et al., 2015, Gamp et al., 2019, Sunstein et al., 2016. Often, prejudice persists. Beliefs persevere. It's hard to teach old dogma new tricks. To rein in belief perseverance, a simple remedy exists: consider the opposite. When the same researchers repeated the capital punishment study, they asked some participants to be as objective and unbiased as possible, Lord et al., 1984. The plea did nothing to reduce biased evaluations of evidence. They also asked another group to consider whether you would have made the same high or low evaluations had exactly the same study produced results on the other side of the issue. Having imagined and pondered opposite findings, these people became much less biased. Newer studies confirm the point: considering opposing arguments reduces bias, Catapano et al., 2019, Van Boven et al., 2019. Once beliefs take root, it takes more compelling evidence to change them than it did to create them. We often label evidence that contradicts our beliefs as weak, Anglin, 2019. Climate change skeptics, for example, tend to view evidence of the climate crisis as inaccurate or untrustworthy, Druckmann and McGrath, 2019. As an old Chinese proverb says, 2/3 of what we see is behind our eyes. A cartoon shows an announcer in a boxing ring and an older man under spotlight looking grumpy standing in the corner. The announcer says, "And in this corner, still undefeated, Frank's long-held beliefs." The effects of framing. Framing the way we present an issue can be a powerful tool of persuasion for good or ill, as psychologists and economists have together learned. Long before the COVID-19 pandemic, Tversky and Kahneman, 1981, asked people to consider a scenario: how should the United States prepare for the outbreak of an unusual disease that could kill 600 people? Participants strongly preferred solutions framed as gains: 200 people will be saved, rather than losses: 400 people will die. As a young scholar, behavioral economist Richard Thaler worked closely with cognitive psychologists Tversky and Kahneman. Thaler and others have shown how the framing of options can nudge people toward beneficial decisions. Benartzi et al., 2017, Daniels and Zlatev, 2019, Thaler and Sunstein, 2008. Healthier eating. Knowing that many people prefer tasty to healthy foods, researchers have nudged healthy choices with tasty-sounding food labels. The university dining hall turnips got chosen more when labeled herb and honey balsamic glazed turnips. Turnwald et al., 2019. Making moral decisions. Imagine an experimenter gives you $5 and asks how much, if any, you want to donate to charity, then asks, what do you personally think is the morally right thing to do in this situation? Researchers did just that and found that nudging people to take a moral mindset made them more generous, increasing donations by 44%. Caprero et al., 2019. Becoming an organ donor. In many countries, people renewing their driver's license can decide whether to be organ donors. Sometimes, the default option is yes, but people can opt out. Nearly 100% of the people in opt-out countries have agreed to be donors. In countries where the default option is no, most do not agree to be donors. Hajhasiani et al., 2013, Johnson and Goldstein, 2003. One way or the other, the default option nudges people's organ donation choices. The point to remember: framing can nudge our attitudes and decisions. The perils and powers of intuition. LOQ 27-6. How do smart thinkers use intuition? It's clear that very smart people can make not so smart judgments. So, are our heads indeed filled with straw, as T.S. Eliot suggested? Good news, cognitive scientists are also revealing intuition's powers. Intuition is recognition born of experience. It is implicit, unconscious, knowledge what we've recorded in our brains but can't fully explain. Chassis and Gobet, 2011, Gore and Sadler-Smith, 2011. We see it in the smart and quick judgments of experienced nurses, firefighters, art critics, car mechanics, and athletes who react without thinking. Indeed, conscious thinking may disrupt well-practiced movements, leading skilled athletes to choke under pressure, as when shooting free throws. Belloc, 2010. And we would see this instant intuition in you, too, for anything in which you have developed knowledge based on experience. Intuition is usually adaptive. Our fast and frugal heuristics let us intuitively rely on learned associations that surface as gut feelings, right or wrong. Seeing a stranger who resembles someone who has harmed or threatened us previously, we may automatically react with distrust. Our intuition aids our survival, and it can also steer us toward more satisfying relationships. Newlyweds' implicit, gut-level attitudes toward their new spouse predict their future marital happiness. McNulty et al., 2017. Smart thinking often means having smart intuitions. Rayo Ellison et al., 2020. Intuition is huge. Unconscious, automatic influences constantly affect our judgments. Custis and Arts, 2010, Kielstrom, 2019. Consider, most people guess that the more complex the choice, the smarter it is to make decisions rationally rather than intuitively. Inbar et al., 2010. Actually, in making complex decisions, we sometimes benefit by letting our brain work on a problem without consciously thinking about it. Strick et al., 2010, 2011. In one series of experiments, 3 groups of people read complex information, for example, about apartments or European football matches. Those in the first group stated their preference immediately after reading information about 4 possible options. The second group, given several minutes to analyze the information, made slightly smarter decisions. But wisest of all, in several studies, were those in the third group, whose attention was distracted for a time, enabling their minds to engage in automatic, unconscious processing of the complex information. The practical lesson: letting a problem incubate while we attend to other things can pay dividends. Dijksterhuis and Strick, 2016. Facing a difficult decision involving a lot of facts, we're wise to gather all the information we can and then say, "Give me some time to not think about this." Even sleeping on it can help. Thanks to our ever-active brain, non-conscious thinking, reasoning, problem-solving, decision-making, planning, can be surprisingly astute. Cresswell et al., 2013, Hassan, 2013, Lin and Murray, 2015. The heart has its reasons which reason does not know. Blaise Pascal, Pensées, 1670. Critics note that some studies have not found the supposed power of unconscious thought, and they remind us that deliberate, conscious thought also furthers smart thinking. Newell, 2015, Neuenstein et al., 2015, Phillips et al., 2016. In challenging situations, making the best chess move, distinguishing between false and real news headlines, deliberate thinking beats instant intuition. Bago et al., 2020, Moxley et al., 2012. Consider. A bat and a ball together cost 110 cents. The bat costs 100 cents more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? Emily's father has 3 daughters. The first 2 are named April and May. What is the third daughter's name? Most people's intuitive responses 10 cents and June are wrong, and a few moments of deliberate thinking reveals why. 3. The bottom line: our 2-track mind makes sweet harmony as smart, critical thinking listens to the creative whispers of our vast unseen mind and then evaluates evidence, tests conclusions, and plans for the future. Ask yourself: can you recall a time when contradictory information challenged one of your views? Was it hard for you to consider the opposite view? What caused you to change your thinking or keep your opinion? For an overview of thinking fallacies, watch this video. TED Talk: Why We Make Bad Decisions. Thinking creatively. LOQ 27-7. What is creativity, and what fosters it? Creativity is the ability to produce novel and valuable ideas. Hennessy and Amabile, 2010. Consider Princeton mathematician Andrew Wiles' incredible, creative moment. Fermat's last theorem, dreamed up by 17th-century mischievous genius Pierre de Fermat, had baffled the greatest mathematical minds for centuries, even after a $2 million prize, in today's dollars, for the first proof was offered in 1908. Wiles had pondered Fermat's theorem for more than 30 years. One morning, out of the blue, the final incredible revelation struck him. It was so indescribably beautiful, it was so simple and so elegant. I couldn't understand how I'd missed it. It was the most important moment of my working life. Singh, 1997, p. 25. Likewise, creative writers and physicists experience many significant ideas, unbidden, during mind-wandering. Gable et al., 2019. Perhaps, you can recall such an experience. Creativity is supported by a certain level of aptitude, ability to learn. Those who score exceptionally high in quantitative aptitude as 13-year-olds, for example, are later more likely to create published or patented work. Bernstein et al., 2019, Lubinsky et al., 2014. Yet there is more to creativity than aptitude, or what intelligence tests reveal. Indeed, brain activity associated with intelligence differs from that associated with creativity. Jung and Heyer, 2013, Shen et al., 2017. A photo shows Alice Munro reading a book and smiling. Creative women researcher Sally Reese, 2001, found that notably creative women were typically intelligent, hardworking, imaginative, and strong-willed as girls. In her 2013 Nobel Prize for Literature acceptance speech, author Alice Munro, shown here, described the creative process as hard work. The part that's hardest is when you go over the story and realize how bad it is. You know, the first part, excitement, the second, pretty good, but then you pick it up one morning and you think, what nonsense, and that is when you really have to get to work. Aptitude tests, such as the SAT, typically require convergent thinking and ability to provide a single correct answer. Creativity tests, how many uses can you think of for a brick, require divergent thinking, the ability to consider many different options and to think in novel ways. Injury to certain areas of the frontal lobes can leave reading, writing, and arithmetic skills intact but destroy imagination. Kolb and Wishaw, 2006. Robert Sternberg and his colleagues believe creativity has 5 components. Sternberg, 1988, 2003, Sternberg and Lubert, 1991, 1992. Expertise. Well-developed knowledge furnishes the ideas, images, and phrases we use as mental building blocks. Chance favors only the prepared mind, observed Louis Pasteur. The longer we work on a problem, the more creative are our solutions. Lucas and Nordgren, 2020. Imaginative thinking skills provide the ability to see things in novel ways, to recognize patterns, and to make connections. Having fully understood a problem's basic elements, we can redefine or explore it in a new way. A venturesome personality seeks new experiences, tolerates ambiguity and risk, and perseveres in overcoming obstacles. Intrinsic motivation is the quality of being driven more by interest, satisfaction, and challenge than by external pressures. Amabile and Hennessy, 1992. Creative people focus less on extrinsic motivators, meeting deadlines, impressing people, or making money than on the pleasure and stimulation of the work itself. A creative environment sparks, supports, and refines creative ideas. Weil stood on the shoulders of others and collaborated with a former student. A study of the careers of 2026 prominent scientists and inventors revealed that the most eminent were mentored, challenged, and supported by their colleagues. Simonton, 1992. Creativity fostering environments support innovation, team building, and communication. Hulshiger et al., 2009. They also minimize anxiety and foster contemplation. Byron and Hasenke, 2011. A cartoon on the left shows a ventriloquist on a stage and a cartoon on the right shows 3 chefs talking. Imaginative thinking cartoonists often display creativity as they see things in new ways or make unusual connections. Follow link for extended description of imaginative thinking. For those seeking to boost the creative process, research offers some ideas. Develop your expertise. Ask yourself what you care about and most enjoy. Follow your passion by broadening your knowledge base and becoming an expert at something. Allow time for incubation. Think hard on a problem, but then set it aside and come back to it later. Periods of inattention to a problem, sleeping on it, allow for automatic processing to form associations. Joan et al., 2008. Set aside time for the mind to roam freely. Creativity springs from defocused attention. Simonton, 2012 AB. So, detach from attention-grabbing TV shows, social media, and video gaming. Jog, go for a long walk, or meditate. Serenity seeds spontaneity. Time alone is the font of creativity, says playwright and musician Lin-Manuel Miranda, Haney, 2016. Experience other cultures and ways of thinking. Viewing life from a different perspective sometimes sets the creative juices flowing. Students who spend time in other cultures learn how to blend new norms with those from their home culture, which increases creativity. Godard et al., 2015, Liu et al., 2018. Even getting out of your neighborhood or embracing intercultural friendships fosters flexible thinking. Kim et al., 2013, Ritter et al., 2012. For a summary of some key ideas from this section, see Table 27.1. Table 27.1 Comparing cognitive processes and strategies. Process or strategy. Description. Powers. Perils. Algorithm. Methodical rule or procedure. Guarantee solution. Requires time and effort. Heuristic. Simple thinking shortcut, such as the availability heuristic, which estimates likelihood based on how easily events come to mind. Lets us act quickly and efficiently. Puts us at risk for errors. Insight. Sudden aha reaction. Provides instant realization of solution. May not happen. Confirmation bias. Tendency to search for support for our own views and ignore contradictory evidence. Lets us quickly recognize supporting evidence. Hinders recognition of contradictory evidence. Fixation. Inability to view problems from a new angle. Focuses thinking. Hinders creative problem solving. Intuition. Fast, automatic feelings and thoughts. Is based on our experience, huge and adaptive. Can lead us to overfeel and underthink. Overconfidence. Overestimating the accuracy of our beliefs and judgments. Allows us to live more happily and to make decisions easily. Puts us at risk for errors. Belief perseverance. Ignoring evidence that contradicts our beliefs. Supports our enduring beliefs. Closes our mind to new ideas. Framing. Wording a question or statement so that it evokes a desired response. Can influence others' decisions. Can produce a misleading result. Creativity. Ability to innovate valuable ideas. Produces new insights and products. May distract from structured, routine work. Retrieval practice. Answers in. Appendix E. Do other species share our cognitive skills? LOQ 27-28. What do we know about thinking in other species? Other animals are surprisingly smart, Duvall, 2016. In her 1908 book, The Animal Mind, pioneering psychologist Margaret Floy Washburn argued that animal consciousness and intelligence can be inferred from their behavior. In 2012, neuroscientists convening at the University of Cambridge added that animal consciousness can also be inferred from their brains. Non-human animals, including all mammals and birds, possess the neural networks that generate consciousness. Herculano Housel, 2020. Consider, then, what animal brains can do. Using concepts and numbers. By touching screens in quest of a food reward, black bears have learned to sort pictures into animal and non-animal categories, or concepts, Vonk et al., 2012. The great apes, a group that includes chimpanzees and gorillas, also form concepts, such as cat and dog. After monkeys have learned these concepts, certain frontal lobe neurons in their brain fire in response to new cat-like images, others to new dog-like images, Friedman et al., 2001. Even pigeons' mere bird brains can sort objects, pictures of cars, cats, chairs, flowers, into categories. Shown a picture of a never-before-seen chair, pigeons will reliably peck a key that represents chairs, Wasserman, 1995. A photo shows an African gray parrot grasping a cutout of the number 2 in its beak. Several other numbers are also kept on the table. Animal cognition in action. Alex, an African gray parrot, could categorize and name objects, Pepperberg, 2009, 2012, 2013. Among his jaw-dropping numerical skills was the ability to comprehend numbers up to 8. He could speak the number of objects. He could add two small clusters of objects and announce the sum. He could indicate which of two numbers was greater. And he gave correct answers when shown various groups of objects. Asked, for example, what color 4? Meaning what's the color of the objects of which there are 4, he could speak the answer. Displaying insight. Psychologist Wolfgang Kohler, 1925, showed that humans are not the only creatures to display insight. He placed a piece of fruit and a long stick outside the cage of a chimpanzee named Sultan, beyond his reach. Inside the cage, Kohler placed a short stick, which Sultan grabbed, using it to try to reach the fruit. After several failed attempts, the chimpanzee dropped the stick and seemed to survey the situation. Then suddenly, as if thinking aha, Sultan jumped up and seized the short stick again. This time, he used it to pull in the longer stick, which he then used to reach the fruit. Apes have even exhibited foresight by storing a tool they could use to retrieve food the next day, Mulcahy and Call, 2006. For one example of a chimpanzee's use of foresight, see figure 27.5a. Two photos show, a chimpanzee walking and, b, a crow dropping stones into a small narrow cylinder of water. Figure 27.5 Animal talents. A. One male chimpanzee in Sweden's Furuvik Zoo was observed every morning collecting stones, which later in the day he used as ammunition to pelt visitors, Osvath and Karvanen, 2012. B. Crows quickly learned to raise the water level in a tube and nab a floating worm by dropping in stones, Bird and Emery, 2009. Birds, too, have displayed insight. One experiment, by, Christopher Bird and Nathan Emery, 2009, brought to life an Aesop fable in which a thirsty crow is unable to reach the water in a partly filled pitcher. See the crow's solution, exactly as in the fable, in figure 27.5b. Other crows have fashioned wire or sticks for extracting food, such as insects in rotting logs, Gelbert et al., 2018, Rutz et al., 2016. In one study, an African gray parrot equaled or bettered the performance of Harvard students at a complex shell game testing visual memory, Palian et al., 2020. Transmitting culture. Like humans, other species invent behaviors and transmit cultural patterns to their observing peers and offspring, Bosch-Akerman and Bosch, 1993. Orca whales may look similar, but each subpopulation has its own language, social behaviors, and food preferences, all of which are transmitted across generations, Mapes, 2021. The Pacific Northwest southern resident orcas find Chinook salmon tasty, while their transient orca cousins dine on seals and other sea mammals. And similar to human accents, naked mole rats' vocal chirps mirror those of other nearby mole rats, Barker et al., 2021. Forest-dwelling chimpanzees select different tools for different purposes: a heavy stick for making holes, a light, flexible stick for fishing for termites, or a pointed stick for roasting marshmallows. Just kidding, they don't roast marshmallows, but they have surprised us with their sophisticated tool use. Sans et al., 2004. Researchers have found at least 39 local customs related to chimpanzee tool use, grooming, and courtship. Claytier and Whiten, 2012, Whiten, 2021 AB. One group may slurp termites directly from a stick, while another group may pluck them off individually. One group may break nuts with a stone, while their neighbors use a piece of wood. One chimpanzee discovered that tree moss could absorb water for drinking from a waterhole, and within 6 days, 7 other observant chimpanzees began using moss in the same way. Hobader et al., 2014. Along with differing communication and hunting styles, these transmitted behaviors are the chimpanzee version of cultural diversity, a diversity that is threatened by habitat loss. Other cognitive skills. Great apes, dolphins, magpies, and elephants recognize themselves in a mirror, demonstrating self-awareness. Boyle, 2021. Elephants also display abilities to learn, remember, discriminate smells, empathize, cooperate, teach, and spontaneously use tools. Byrne et al., 2009. Chimpanzees show altruism, cooperation, and group aggression. Like humans, they may purposefully kill their neighbor, and they grieve over dead relatives. De Biro et al., 2010, Mitani et al., 2010. Thinking about other species' abilities brings us back to our initial question: how deserving are we of the label Homo sapiens wise human? On decision-making and risk assessment, our smart but error-prone species might rate AB. On problem-solving, where humans are inventive yet vulnerable to confirmation bias and fixation, we would probably receive a better mark, perhaps AB+. And on cognitive efficiency and creativity, our quick, though sometimes faulty, heuristics and divergent thinking would surely earn us an A. What time is it now? When we asked you, in the section on overconfidence, to estimate how quickly you would finish this module, did you underestimate or overestimate? Review. Module 27, Thinking. Learning objectives. Test yourself. Answer these repeated learning objective questions on your own, before showing the answers here, or checking the answers in Appendix D, to improve your retention of the concepts. McDaniel et al., 2009, 2015. Terms and concepts to remember. Test yourself. Write down the definition in your own words, then check your answer. Cognition. Metacognition. Concept. Prototype. Algorithm. Heuristic. Insight. Confirmation bias. Fixation. Mental set. Intuition. Representativeness heuristic. Availability heuristic. Overconfidence. Belief perseverance. Framing. Nudge. Creativity. Convergent thinking. Divergent thinking. Module test. Test yourself. Answer the following questions on your own first, then show the answers here, or check your answers in Appendix E. Module 28, Language and Thought. A photo shows an Orthodox Jewish rabbi standing and reading a book to Orthodox students in a classroom. Language transmits knowledge, whether spoken, written, or signed. Language, the original wireless communication, enables mind-to-mind information transfer, and with it the transmission of civilizations' accumulated knowledge across generations. Language is more than vibrating air, it is our spoken, written, or signed words, and the ways we combine them to communicate meaning. When IDM created this paragraph, my fingers on the keyboard generated electronic binary numbers that morphed into the squiggles before you. These squiggles trigger formless nerve impulses that travel to several areas of your brain, which integrate the information, compare it to stored information, and decode meaning. Thanks to language, information is moving from our minds to yours. Many animals know little more than what they sense. Thanks to language, we comprehend much that we've never seen and that our distant ancestors never knew. And thanks to technology, we can use language to communicate across vast distances through spoken, written, and even pictorial words, including the 2015 Oxford English Dictionary Word of the Year, the emoji. Let's begin our study of language by examining some of its components. Language structure. LOQ 28-1. What are the structural components of a language? Consider how we might go about inventing a language. For a spoken language, we would need 3 building blocks. Phonemes are the smallest distinctive sound units in a language. The word that has 3 phonemes th, a, and t. Each e in Mercedes is a different phoneme because each is pronounced differently. Linguists surveying nearly 500 languages have identified 869 different phonemes in human speech, but no language uses all of them. Holt, 2002, Matthieson, 1984. Those 800+ sounds can form all the words in every language of the world, notes child language researcher Patricia Cole, 2015. English uses about 40 phonemes, other languages use anywhere from half to more than twice as many. Consonant phonemes generally carry more information than do vowel phonemes. The tredje fth statement should be evident from this brief demonstration. Morphemes are the smallest language units that carry meaning. In English, a few morphemes are also phonemes, the article a, for instance. But most morphemes combine 2 or more phonemes. The word readers, for example, contains 3 morphemes, read, er, that is, one who reads, and s, not one but multiple readers. Every word in a language contains 1 or more morphemes. Grammar is a language's set of rules that enable people to communicate. Grammatical rules guide us in deriving meaning from sounds, semantics, and in ordering words into sentences, syntax. Like life constructed from the genetic code's simple alphabet, language is complexity built of simplicity. In English, for example, 40 or so phonemes can be combined to form more than 100,000 morphemes, which alone or in combination produce the 600,000 variations of past and present words in the Oxford English Dictionary. Using those words, we can then create an infinite number of sentences, most of which, like this one, are original. We know that you can know why we worry that you think the sentence is starting to get too complex, but that complexity and our capacity to communicate and comprehend it is what distinguishes our human language capacity. Hauser et al., 2002, Premack, 2007. Retrieval practice. Answers in Appendix E. Language acquisition and development. We humans have an astonishing knack for language. With little effort, we draw from tens of thousands of words in our memory, assemble them on the fly with near-perfect syntax, and spew them out, 3 words a second, Vigliacco and Hartzucker, 2002. Given how many ways we can mess up, our language capacity is truly amazing. Language is a uniquely human gift, central to our experience of being human. Cognitive scientist Lera Boroditsky, 2009. Language acquisition, how do we learn language? LOQ 28-2. How do we acquire language, and what did Chomsky mean by universal grammar? Linguist Noam Chomsky has argued that language is an unlearned human trait, separate from other parts of human cognition. He theorized that a built-in predisposition to learn grammar rules, which he called universal grammar, helps explain why preschoolers pick up language so readily and use grammar so well. It happens so naturally as birds learn to fly that training hardly helps. Whether in Indiana or Indonesia, we intuitively follow similar syntax rules. Ari W1-2-CHAPTER9-module27-28, 2018. All human languages, and there are more than 6,000 of them, have nouns, verbs, and adjectives as grammatical building blocks, and they use words in some common ways. Blazy et al., 2016, Futrell et al., 2015. Other researchers note that children learn grammar as they discern patterns in the language they hear. Ibbotson and Tomasello, 2016. And Chomsky agrees that we are not born with a built-in specific language or specific set of grammatical rules. The world's languages are structurally very diverse, more so than the universal grammar idea implies. Bergen, 2014. Whatever language we experience as children, whether spoken or signed, we will readily learn its specific grammar and vocabulary. Babelyer et al., 2003. And we always start speaking mostly in nouns, kitty, da, rather than in verbs and adjectives. Bornstein et al., 2004. Biology and experience work together. A photo shows two Nicaraguan deaf children using sign language to communicate with each other. Creating a language brought together as if on a desert island, actually a school. Nicaragua's young deaf children over time drew upon sign gestures from home to create their own Nicaraguan Sign Language, complete with words and intricate grammar. Activated by a social context, nature and nurture work creatively together. Osborne, 1999, Sandler et al., 2005, Senghas and Coppola, 2001. Retrieval practice. Answers in Appendix E. Language development. When do we learn language? LOQ 28-3. What are the milestones in language development, and when is the critical period for acquiring language? Make a quick guess. How many words of your native language did you learn between your first birthday and your high school graduation? Although you use only 150 words for about half of what you say, you probably learned about 60,000 words. Bloom, 2000, McMurray, 2007. That averages, after age 2, to nearly 3,500 words each year, or about 10 each day. How you did it, how those 3,500 words could so far outnumber the roughly 200 words your school teachers consciously taught you each year is one of the great human wonders. Could you even now state the rules of syntax, the correct way to string words together to form sentences, for the language you speak fluently? Most of us cannot. Yet before you could add 2 plus 2, you were creating your own original sentences and applying these rules. As a preschooler, you comprehended and spoke with a facility that far outpaced even the brightest adult's ability to learn a new language. Receptive language. Children's language development moves from simplicity to complexity. Babies are born prepared to learn any language, with a slight bent toward the language they heard in the womb. By 4 months of age, babies can recognize differences in speech sounds. Stager and Worker, 1997. They can also read lips. We know this because in experiments by Patricia Cole and Andrew Meltzoff, 1982, babies have preferred looking at a face that matches a sound in A coming from wide open lips and an EE from a mouth with corners pulled back. Recognizing such differences marks the beginning of the development of babies' receptive language, their ability to understand what is said to and about them. At 7 months and beyond, they grow in their power to do what adults find difficult when listening to an unfamiliar language, to segment spoken sounds into individual words. When adults listen to an unfamiliar language, the syllables all run together. A young Sudanese couple new to North America and unfamiliar with English might, for example, here United Nations as United Nations. Their 7-month-old daughter would not have this problem. Human infants display a remarkable ability to learn statistical aspects of human speech. Batarink, 2017, Worker et al., 2012. Their brains not only discern word breaks, they statistically analyze which syllables as in hap pi ba by most often go together. After just 2 minutes of exposure to a computer voice speaking an unbroken, monotone string of nonsense syllables, bidaku padadigo labu bidaku, 8-month-olds were able to recognize, as indicated by their attention, 3-syllable sequences that appeared repeatedly. Safran, 2009, Safran et al., 1996. A photo shows a mother interacting with an infant who is lying on a bed. The infant reaches out to the face of the woman with their hands as the woman smiles and touches the infant's hand. A natural talent. Human infants come with a remarkable capacity to soak up language. But the particular language they learn will reflect their unique interactions with others. Productive language. Long after the beginnings of receptive language, babies' productive language, their ability to produce words, matures. Before nurture molds baby's speech, nature enables a wide range of possible sounds in the babbling stage, beginning around 4 months. In this stage, babies seem to sample all the sounds they can make, such as agu. Babbling does not imitate the adult speech babies hear, it includes sounds from various languages. From this early babbling, a listener could not identify an infant as being, say, French, Korean, or Ethiopian. By about 10 months, infants' babbling has changed so that a trained ear can identify the household language. Du Bois and Barthes et al., 1989. Deaf infants who observe their deaf parents using sign language begin to babble more with their hands. Petitto and Marentet, 1991. Without exposure to other languages, babies lose their ability to do what we cannot, to discriminate and produce sounds and tones found outside their native language. Cole et al., 2014, Meltzoff et al., 2009. Thus, by adulthood, those who speak only English cannot discriminate certain sounds in Japanese speech. Nor can Japanese adults with no training in English hear the difference between the English R and L. For a Japanese-speaking adult, la la ra may sound like the same syllable repeated. Around their first birthday, most children enter the one-word stage. They know that sounds carry meanings, and they begin to use sounds, usually only one barely recognizable syllable, such as ma or de, to communicate meaning. But gradually the infant's language conforms more to the family's language. Across the world, babies' first words are often nouns that label objects or people. Tardif et al., 2008. At this one-word stage, doggy may mean look at the dog out there. Care to guess babies' most common first words? In English, Croatian, French, Italian, and Kiswahili, they are mommy and daddy. Frank et al., 2019. At about 18 months, children's word learning explodes from about a word per week to a word per day. By their second birthday, most have entered the 2-word stage. Table 28.1. They start uttering 2-word sentences in telegraphic speech. Like yesterday's telegrams that charged by the word, terms accepted. Send money, a 2-year-old's speech contains mostly nouns and verbs. Want juice. Also, like telegrams, their speech follows rules of syntax, arranging words in a sensible order. English-speaking children typically place adjectives before nouns, White House rather than house white. Spanish reverses this order, as in Casablanca. Table 28.1 Summary of language development. Month, approximate. Stage. 4. Babbles many speech sounds, agu. 10. Babbling resembles household language, mama. 12. One-word speech, kitty. 24. Two-word speech, get ball. 24 plus. Rapid development into complete sentences. A cartoon shows a caveman talking to a cave woman. The caveman says, "Got idea. Talk better. Combine words. Make sentences." Moving out of the two-word stage, children quickly begin uttering longer phrases. Frumkin and Rodman, 1983. By early elementary school, they understand complex sentences and begin to enjoy the humor conveyed by double meanings. You never starve in the desert because of all the sandwiches there. Retrieval practice. Answers in Appendix E. Critical periods. Some children, such as those who receive a cochlear implant to enable hearing, or those who are adopted by a family that uses another language, get a late start on learning a language. For these late bloomers, language development follows the same sequence, although usually at a faster pace. Erdmer et al., 2007, Snedeker et al., 2007. But there is a limit on how long language learning can be delayed. Childhood seems to represent a critical, or sensitive, period for learning certain aspects of language before the language learning window gradually closes. Hernandez and Lee, 2007, Lenneberg, 1967. If not exposed to either a spoken or a signed language by age 7, children lose their ability to fully comprehend and use any language. Cultural and other environmental variations affect children's language exposure. Children exposed to less complex language, such as US 4-year-olds in classrooms with 3-year-olds, or some children from impoverished homes, often display less language skill. Ansari et al., 2015, Hirsch-Pasek et al., 2015. Reading to children increases language exposure. Jessica Logan and her colleagues, 2019, found that frequent exposure to children's books boosts children's school readiness. Kids who hear more vocabulary words are going to be better prepared to see those words in print when they enter school. Language learning ability is universal, but it is easiest when we're children. If we learn a new language as adults, we will usually speak it with the accent of our native language and with imperfect grammar. Harchern et al., 2018. In one experiment, U.S. immigrants from South Korea and China considered 276 English sentences. Yesterday the hunter shoots a deer, and decided whether each was grammatically correct or incorrect. Johnson and Newport, 1991. All had been in the United States for approximately 10 years, some had arrived in early childhood, others as adults. As Figure 28.1 reveals, those who learned their second language early learned it best. A photo shows two Asian women taking a test, and a line graph plots percentage correct on grammar test against age. Figure 28.1. Our ability to learn a new language diminishes with age. 10 years after coming to the United States, Asian immigrants took an English grammar test. Those who arrived before age 8 understood American English grammar as well as native speakers. Those who arrived later did not. Data from Johnson and Newport, 1991. Follow link for extended description of Figure 28.1. Our ability to learn a new language diminishes with age. Retrieval practice. Answers in Appendix E. Deafness and language development. The impact of early experiences is evident in language learning in deaf children of hearing non-singing parents. These children typically do not experience language during their early years. For example, natively deaf children who learn sign language after age 9 never learn it as well as those who learned it early in life. Those who learn to sign as teens or adults never become as fluent as native signers in producing and comprehending subtle grammatical differences. Newport, 1990. As a flower's growth requires nourishment, so, too, Children's language acquisition requires early life language exposure. More than 90% of all deaf children are born to hearing parents. Most of these parents want their children to experience their world of sound and talk. Cochlear implants enable this by converting sounds into electrical signals and stimulating the auditory nerve by means of electrodes threaded into the child's cochlea. But if an implant is to help children become proficient in oral communication, parents cannot delay the surgery until their child reaches the age of consent. Giving cochlear implants to children is hotly debated. Deaf culture advocates object to giving implants to children who were deaf prelingually. The National Association of the Deaf, for example, argues that deafness is not a disability because native signers are not linguistically disabled. More than 5 decades ago, Gallaudet University linguist William Stokoe, 1960, showed that sign is a complete language with its own grammar, syntax, and meanings. Deaf culture advocates sometimes further contend that deafness could as well be considered vision enhancement as hearing impairment. Close your eyes and immediately you, too, will notice your attention being drawn to your other senses. In one experiment, people who had spent 90 minutes sitting quietly blindfolded became more accurate in their location of sounds. Lewald, 2007. When kissing, lovers minimize distraction and increase sensitivity by closing their eyes. A photo shows a happy boy from Malawi wearing a hearing aid. Hearing improved. A boy in Malawi experiences new hearing aids. People who lose one channel of sensation compensate with a slight enhancement of their other sensory abilities. Bachman and Dixon, 1992, Levy and Langer, 1992. Those who have been deaf from birth exhibit enhanced visual processing. Almeida et al., 2015. Their auditory cortex, starved for sensory input, remains largely intact but becomes responsive to touch and to visual input. Carnes et al., 2012. Once repurposed, the auditory cortex becomes less available for hearing, which helps explain why cochlear implants are most effective when given before age 2. Gears and Nicholas, 2013, Parco et al., 2010. A photo shows a referee making the safe signal with his arms outstretched sideways, as 2 players bump into each other on the baseball field. Talking hands. Human language appears to have evolved from gestured communications. Corballis, 2002, 2003, Pollock and Duvall, 2007. Even today, gestures are naturally associated with spontaneous speech, and similarly so for blind and sighted speakers of a given language. Ojkaliskan et al., 2016. Both gesture and speech communicate, and when they convey the same rather than different information, as they do in baseball's sign language, we humans understand faster and more accurately. Dargu et al., 2019, Hostetter, 2011, Kelly et al., 2010. Outfielder William Hoy, the first deaf player to join the major leagues, 1892, reportedly helped invent hand signals for strike. Safe. Shown here, and you're out. Pollard, 1992. Referees in all sports now use invented signs, and fans are fluent in sports sign language. Living in a silent world. Worldwide, 466 million people live with hearing loss, WHO, 2019. Some are profoundly deaf. Most, more men than women, have hearing loss. Agrawal et al., 2008. Some were deaf from birth, others have known the hearing world. Some sign and identify with the language-based deaf culture. Others, especially those who lost their hearing after speaking a language, are oral and converse with the hearing world by reading lips or written notes. Still others move between the two cultures. The challenges of life without hearing may be greatest for children. Unable to communicate in customary ways, signing playmates may struggle to coordinate their play with speaking playmates. School achievement may also suffer, Academic subjects are rooted in spoken languages. Adolescents may feel socially excluded, with the resulting low self-confidence. Deaf children who grow up around other deaf people more often identify with deaf culture and feel positive self-esteem. If raised in a signing household, whether by deaf or hearing parents, they also express higher self-esteem and feel more accepted. Batchava, 1993, 1994. Adults who lose hearing late in life also face challenges. Expending effort to hear words drains their capacity to perceive, comprehend, and remember them. Wingfield et al., 2005. In several studies, people with hearing loss, especially those not wearing hearing aids, have reported more sadness, less social engagement, and worrying that they irritate others. Kashubequest and Meyer, 2008, National Council on Aging, 2000. They also may experience a sort of shyness. It's almost universal among the deaf to want to cause hearing people as little fuss as possible, observed Henry Kaiser, 1990, p. 244, a Chicago newspaper editor and columnist who lost his hearing at age 3. We can be self-effacing and diffident to the point of invisibility. Sometimes this tendency can be crippling. I must fight it all the time. Helen Keller, both blind and deaf, noted that blindness cuts people off from things. Deafness cuts people off from people. IDM understand. My mother, with whom we communicated by writing notes on an erasable magic pad, spent her last dozen years in an utterly silent world, largely withdrawn from the stress and strain of trying to interact with people outside a small circle of family and old friends. My own hearing is declining on a trajectory toward hers. With my hearing aid and cochlear implant receiver out at night, I cannot understand my wife speaking from her adjacent pillow. Even with hearing aids, I sit front and center at plays and meetings and seek quiet corners in restaurants. I do benefit from cool technology, see hearingloop.org, that, at the press of a button, can transform my hearing aid into an in-the-ear loudspeaker for the broadcast of phone, TV, and public address system sound. Yet I still experience frustration when I can't hear the joke everyone else is guffawing over, when, after repeated tries, I just can't catch that exasperated person's question and can't fake my way around it, when family members give up and say, "Oh, never mind," after trying 3 times to tell me something unimportant. As she aged, my mother came to feel that seeking social interaction was simply not worth the effort. I share newspaper columnist Kaiser's belief that communication is worth the effort, p. 246. So I will grit my teeth and plunge ahead. To reach out, to connect, to communicate with others, even across a chasm of silence, is to affirm our humanity as social creatures. The brain and language. LOQ 28-4. What brain areas are involved in language processing and speech? We think of speaking and reading, or writing and reading, or singing and speaking as merely different examples of the same general ability language. But consider this curious finding: damage to any of several cortical areas can produce aphasia, impairment of language. Even more curious, some people with aphasia can speak fluently but cannot read, despite good vision. Others can comprehend what they read but cannot speak. Still others can write but not read but not write, read numbers but not letters, or sing but not speak. These cases suggest that language is complex and that different brain areas must serve different language functions. Indeed, in 1865, French physician Paul Broca confirmed a fellow physician's observation that after damage to an area of the left frontal lobe, later called Broca's area, a person would struggle to speak words, yet could sing familiar songs and comprehend speech. A decade later, German investigator Karl Wernicke discovered that after damage to a specific area of the left temporal lobe, Wernicke's area, people could not understand others' sentences and could speak only meaningless sentences. Brain scans have confirmed activity in Broca's and Wernicke's areas during language processing, figure 28.2. For those with a larger than average Broca's area, grammar learning is a breeze. Novan et al. 2019. For people with aphasia, electrical stimulation of Broca's area can help restore their speaking abilities. Marangolo et al. 2016. One man, whose stroke eliminated his ability to speak, allowed researchers to implant an electrode array over his speech motor cortex. Moses et al. 2021. By decoding the man's brain activity, researchers could understand what he was trying to say about half of the time, even though he could not utter a single word. Not to be able to communicate with anyone, to have a normal conversation and express yourself in any way, the man noted, using a head-controlled mouse to type key by key, it's devastating, very hard to live with. Belloc, 2021. Two illustrations show the side view of a person with the brain highlighted. Figure 28.2 Brain activity when speaking and hearing words. Follow link for extended description of Figure 28.2 Brain activity when speaking and hearing words. The brain's processing of language is complex. Broca's area coordinates with the brain's processing of language in other areas as well. Flinker et al. 2015, Tremblay and Dick, 2016. Although you experience language as a single, unified stream, fMRI scans would show that your brain is busily multitasking and networking. Different neural networks are activated by nouns and verbs, or objects and actions, by different vowels, by stories of visual versus motor experiences, by who spoke and what was said, and by many other stimuli. Parakayan et al. 2011, Shapiro et al. 2006, Spear et al. 2009. And these same networks become activated whether you're reading or listening to the words. Dainies et al. 2019. Moreover, if you're lucky enough to be natively fluent in two languages, your brain processes them in similar areas. Kim et al. 2017. But your brain doesn't use the same areas if you learned a second language after the first, or if you sign rather than speak your second language. Birkin et al. 2015, Kovelman et al. 2014. The point to remember, in processing language, as in other forms of information processing, the brain operates by dividing its mental functions speaking, perceiving, thinking, and remembering into subfunctions. Your conscious experience of learning about the brain and language seems indivisible, but thanks to your parallel processing, many different neural networks are pooling their work to give meaning to the words, sentences, and paragraphs. Fedorenko et al. 2016, Snell and Granger, 2019. E pluribus unum, out of many, 1. For an overview of language in the brain, watch this video, Neuroscience and Language. Retrieval practice. Answers in Appendix E. Thinking and Language. LOQ 28-5. What is the relationship between thinking and language, and what is the value of thinking in images? Thinking and language, which comes first? This is one of psychology's great chicken and egg questions. Do our ideas come first and then the words to name them? Or are our thoughts conceived in words and unthinkable without them? The theory of linguistic determinism was developed by linguist Benjamin Lee Whorf, 1956, who believed that those using languages with no past tense, such as the Hopi, could not readily think about the past. But Whorf's theory was too extreme. We all think about things for which we have no words. Can you think of a shade of blue you cannot name? Can you imagine wondering if someone might fall? A less extreme idea, linguistic relativism, recognizes that our words influence our thinking. Gentner, 2016. To those who speak two dissimilar languages, such as English and Japanese, this point seems obvious. Brown, 1986. Unlike English, which has a rich vocabulary for self-focused emotions such as anger. Japanese has more words for interpersonal emotions such as sympathy. Marcus and Kitayama, 1991. Many bilingual individuals report that they have different senses of self, that they feel like different people depending on which language they are using. Matsumoto, 1994, Pavlenko, 2014. Bilingual individuals may even reveal different personality profiles when taking the same test in two languages, with their differing cultural associations. Chen and Bond, 2010, Dingas and Hull, 1992. When China-born, bilingual University of Waterloo students described themselves in English, their responses fit typical Canadian profiles, expressing mostly positive self-statements and moods. When responding in Chinese, the same students gave typically Chinese self-descriptions, reporting more agreement with Chinese values and roughly equal positive and negative self-statements and moods. Ross et al., 2002. Similar attitude and personality changes have been shown when switching between Spanish and English or Arabic and English. Oganek et al., 2010, Ramirez Esparza et al., 2006. Learn a new language and get a new soul, says a Czech proverb. So, our words do influence our thinking. Boroditsky, 2011. Words define our mental categories. Whether we live in New Mexico, New South Wales, or New Guinea, we see the same colors, but we use our native language to classify and remember them. Davidoff, 2004, Roberson et al., 2004, 2005. Imagine viewing three colors and calling two of them yellow and one of them blue. Later you would likely see and recall the yellows as being more similar. But if you speak the language of Papua New Guinea's Biranmo people, which has words for two different shades of yellow, you would more speedily perceive and better recall the variations between the two yellows. And if your native language is Russian or Greek, which have distinct names for various shades of blue, you would perceive and recall the yellows as more similar and remember the blues better. Mayer and Abdel Rahman, 2018. Words matter. A photo shows two Biranmo children in colorful traditional clothing. Culture and color in Papua New Guinea. Biranmo children have words for different shades of yellow, which might enable them to spot and recall yellow variations more quickly. Here and everywhere, the languages we speak profoundly shape the way we think, the way we see the world, the way we live our lives, noted psychologist Lera Boroditsky, 2009. On the color spectrum, blue blends into green until we draw a dividing line between the portions we call blue and green. Although equally different on the color spectrum, two different items that share the same color name, as the two blues do in figure 28.3, contrast B, are harder to distinguish than two items with different names, blue and green, as in figure 28.3, contrast A, Ozgen, 2004. Likewise, $4.99 perceptually differs more from $5.01 than from $4.97. And to doctors, a patient who is 80 seems, relative to a 79-year-old, older than does a 79-year-old compared to one who is 78, Olensky et al., 2020. An illustration shows 6 squares arranged horizontally and divided into 2 groups with shades of green on the left and shades of blue on the right. Figure 28.3 Language and perception. When people view blocks of equally different colors, they perceive those with different names as more different. Thus, the green and blue in contrast A may appear to differ more than the 2 equally different blues in contrast B. Ozgen, 2004. Follow link for extended description of figure 28.3 Language and perception. Given their subtle influence on thinking, we do well to choose our words carefully. When hearing the generic he, as in the artist and his work, people are more likely to picture a man. Henley, 1989, Ng, 1990. If he and his were truly gender-free, we shouldn't skip a beat when hearing that man, like other mammals, nurses his young. Pronoun usage can also influence how we feel about ourselves. Transgender and gender nonconforming youth report feeling respected and included when their preferred pronouns are used he/she, him/her, they/their. Olson and Gulgaz, 2018, Ray et al., 2019. And consider, gender prejudice also occurs more in gendered languages, such as French, in which, for example, la table is feminine and le téléphone is masculine. De France et al., 2020, Lewis and Lupien, 2020. To expand language is to expand the ability to think. Young children's thinking develops hand in hand with their language, Gonick and Meltzoff, 1986. Indeed, it is very difficult to think about or conceptualize certain abstract ideas, commitment, freedom, or rhyming, without language. And what is true for preschoolers is true for everyone. It pays to increase your word power. That's why most textbooks, including this one, introduce new words to teach new ideas and new ways of thinking. All words are pegs to hang ideas on. Henry Ward Beecher, Proverbs from Plymouth Pulpit, 1887. Increased word power helps explain some benefits of bilingualism. McGill University researcher Wallace Lambert, 1992, Lambert et al., 1993, reported that bilingual people are skilled at inhibiting one language while using another. For example, inhibiting crayon amarillo while saying yellow crayon to English speakers, then doing the reverse for Spanish speakers. Sui et al., 2019. Bilingual children also exhibit enhanced social skill by being better able to understand another's perspective. Fan et al., 2015, Gamp et al., 2019. Bilingual preschool children have also displayed less racial bias. Singh et al., 2020. Working with bilingual education advocates Olga Melikov, Valerie Neal, and Muriel Parks, Lambert helped implement a Canadian program that has given millions of English-speaking children a natural French fluency via French immersion schooling. Statistics Canada, 2019. Compared with similarly capable children in control groups, these children exhibit no loss of English fluency. They also display increased creativity and appreciation for French-Canadian culture. Genesee and Gandara, 1999, Lazaruk, 2007. One lingering dispute concerns whether there exists, as some have claimed, a bilingual advantage in cognitive tasks such as planning, focusing attention, and then, when needed, switching attention. Antonio, 2019, Bialystok, 2017. After reviewing all the available research, critics argue that any bilingual advantage on overall cognitive performance is unreliable and small. Gunnarud et al., 2020, Nichols et al., 2020. Stay tuned, this research story is still being written. Ask yourself, have you tried to learn a new language after learning your first language? If so, how did learning this other language differ from learning your first language? Does speaking it feel different? Retrieval practice. Answers in Appendix E. Thinking in images. To turn on the cold water in your bathroom, in which direction do you turn the handle? To answer, you probably thought not in words but with implicit, non-declarative, procedural, memory, a mental picture of how you do it. Indeed, we often think in images, mental practice relies on it. Pianist Lu Chi-kung harnessed this power. 1 year after placing second in the 1958 Tchaikovsky piano competition, Lu was imprisoned during China's Cultural Revolution. Soon after his release, after 7 years without touching a piano, he was back on tour. Critics judged Liu's musicianship as better than ever. How did he continue to develop without practice? I did practice, said Liu, every day. I rehearsed every piece I had ever played, note by note, in my mind. Garfield, 1986. For someone who has learned a skill, such as ballet dancing, even watching the activity will activate the brain's internal simulation of it. Calvo Marino et al., 2004. So, too, will imagining a physical experience, which activates some of the same neural networks that are active during the actual experience. Gries's and Dicity, 2001. Small wonder, then, that mental practice has become a standard part of training for Olympic athletes. Blumenstein and Orbach, 2012, Ungerleider, 2005. One experiment on mental practice and basketball free throw shooting tracked the University of Tennessee women's team over 35 games, Savoy and Beitel, 1996. During that time, the team's free throw accuracy increased from approximately 52% in games following standard physical practice, to some 65% after mental practice. Players had repeatedly imagined making free throws under various conditions, including being trash-talked by their opposition. In a dramatic conclusion, Tennessee won the national championship game in overtime, thanks in part to their free throw shooting. A photo shows a woman throwing a basketball. Researchers demonstrated academic benefits of mental rehearsal with two groups of introductory psychology students facing a midterm exam 1 week later. Taylor et al., 1998. Students not engaged in any mental rehearsal formed a third control group. The first group spent 5 minutes daily visualizing themselves scanning the posted grade list, seeing their A, beaming with joy, and feeling proud. This daily outcome simulation added only 2 points to their exam score average. The second group spent 5 minutes daily visualizing themselves reading their text, going over notes, eliminating distractions, declining an invitation out. This daily process simulation paid off. The group began studying sooner, spent more time at it, and beat the others' average score by 8 points. The point to remember: it's better to imagine how to reach your goal than merely to fantasize your desired destination. Psychological research on thinking and language mirrors the mixed impressions of our species by those in fields such as literature and religion. Our misjudgments are commonplace and our intellectual failures striking. Yet our problem-solving ingenuity and our extraordinary power of language mark humankind as, in Shakespeare's words, almost infinite in faculties. Ask yourself: how could you use mental practice to improve your performance in some area of your life, for example, in your schoolwork, personal relationships, or hobbies? Retrieval practice. Answers in Appendix E. Do other species have language? LOQ 28-6. What do we know about other species' capacity for language? Humans, more than other animals, can take others' perspectives and regulate themselves with a moral sense. Lee and Tomasello, 2021. Humans also have long proclaimed that language sets us above other animals. When we study human language, asserted linguist Noam Chomsky, 1972, we are approaching what some might call the human essence, the qualities of mind that are, so far as we know, unique to humans. Is it true that humans, alone, have language? Some animals display basic language processing. Pigeons can learn the difference between words and non-words, but they could never read this book. Scarf et al., 2016. Various monkey species sound different alarm cries for different predators. Hearing the leopard alarm, vervets climb the nearest tree. Hearing the eagle alarm, they rush into the bushes. Hearing the snake alarm, they stand up and scan the ground. Byrne, 1991, Clark et al., 2015, Coy et al., 2015. To indicate multiple threats, some combination of eagle, leopard, falling tree, and neighboring group, monkeys will combine 6 different calls into a 25-call sequence. Balter, 2010. But are such communications language? In the late 1960s, psychologists Alan Gardner and Beatrix Gardner, 1969, aroused enormous scientific and public interest with their work with Washoe, a young chimpanzee. Building on chimpanzees' natural tendencies for gestured communication, they taught Washoe sign language. After 4 years, Washoe could use 132 signs. By her life's end in 2007, she was using 250 signs. Metzler, 2011, Sans et al., 1998. During the 1970s, some chimpanzees reportedly began stringing signs together to form sentences. Washoe, for example, signed "You me go out, please." Some word combinations seemed creative, saying water bird for swan or apple, which is orange for orange. Patterson, 1978, Rumbaugh, 1977. But by the late 1970s, other psychologists were growing skeptical. Were the chimps language champs, or were the researchers chumps? Consider, said the skeptics. Ape vocabularies and sentences are simple, rather like those of a 2-year-old child. And unlike children, apes gain their limited vocabularies only with great difficulty. Wynne, 2004, 2008. Apes signing might also be nothing more than aping their trainers' signs and learning that certain arm movements produce rewards. Terrace, 1979. When information is unclear, we are prone to perceptual set, a tendency to see what we want or expect to see. Interpreting chimpanzee signs as language may have been little more than the trainer's wishful thinking. Terrace, 1979. When Washoe seemingly signed water bird, she may actually have been separately naming water and bird. Give orange me give eat orange, is a far cry from the exquisite syntax of a 3-year-old. Anderson, 2004, Pinker, 1995. Rules of syntax in human language govern the order of words in sentences. So to a child, you tickle and tickle, you communicate different ideas. Not so to a chimpanzee. Controversy can stimulate progress, and in this case, it triggered more evidence of other species' abilities to think and communicate. One surprising finding was that Washoe trained her adopted son Lily to use the signs she had learned. Without human assistance, Lily eventually picked up 68 signs, simply by observing Washoe and 3 other language-trained chimps signing together. Even more stunning was a later report. Kanzi, a bonobo with a reported 384-word vocabulary, could understand syntax in spoken English. Savage, Rumbaugh et al., 1993, 2009. Kanzi, who appears to have the receptive language ability of a human 2-year-old, has responded appropriately when asked, "Can you show me the light, and can you bring me the flashlight, and can you turn the light on?" Given stuffed animals and asked for the first time to make the dog bite the snake, he put the snake to the dog's mouth. A photo shows a border collie lying in a meadow happily panting with its tongue out. Comprehending canine border collie Rico had a vocabulary of 200 human words. If asked to retrieve a toy with a name he had never heard, Rico would pick out a new toy from a group of familiar items. Kaminsky et al., 2004. Hearing that name for the second time 4 weeks later, Rico more often than not would retrieve the same toy. Another border collie, Chaser, set an animal record by learning 1,000 object names. Pili, 2013. Like a 3-year-old child, she could also categorize them by function and shape and could fetch a ball or fetch a doll. So, are humans the only language-using species? If by language we mean an ability to communicate through a meaningful sequence of symbols, then apes are indeed capable of language. But if we mean a verbal or signed expression of complex grammar that enables us to exchange thoughts, most psychologists would now agree that humans alone possess language. Suttendorf, 2018. One thing is certain, studies of animal language and thinking have moved psychologists toward a greater appreciation of other species' remarkable abilities. Duvall, 2019, Wilson et al., 2015. In the past, many psychologists doubted that other species could plan, form concepts, count, use tools, or show compassion. Thorpe, 1974. Today, thanks to animal researchers, we know better. When communicating, chimps seem to consider what others know. Does my friend know a snake is nearby? Crockford et al., 2017. Non-human animals exhibit insight, show family loyalty, care for one another, and transmit cultural patterns across generations. Working out what this means for the moral rights of other animals is an unfinished task. Ask yourself: can you think of a time when you believed an animal was communicating with you? How might you put that to a test? For examples of intelligent communication and problem solving among orangutans, elephants, and killer whales, watch this video, How Intelligent Are Animals? For a helpful tutorial animation on this type of research method, watch this video, Case Studies. Retrieval Practice. Answers in Appendix E. Review. Module 28, Language and Thought. Learning Objectives. Test yourself. Answer these repeated learning objective questions on your own, before showing the answers here, or checking the answers in Appendix D, to improve your retention of the concepts. McDaniel et al., 2009, 2015. Terms and concepts to remember. Test yourself. Write down the definition in your own words, then check your answer. Language. Phoneme. Morpheme. Grammar. Syntax. Babbling stage. One-word stage. Two-word stage. Telegraphic speech. Aphasia. Broca's area. Wernicke's area. Linguistic determinism. Linguistic relativism. Module test. Test yourself. Answer the following questions on your own first, then show the answers here, or check your answers in Appendix E. Chapter 10 Intelligence, Modules 29 to 31. A photo shows a woman wearing protective eye gear, ear muffs, and gloves and cutting a piece of wood with a table saw. Module 29. What is intelligence? Is intelligence one general ability? The Cattell-Horn-Carroll intelligence theory. Theories of multiple intelligences. Emotional intelligence. Module 30 Intelligence Assessment and Dynamics. Early and modern tests of mental abilities. Principles of test construction. Extremes of intelligence. Intelligence across the lifespan. Thinking critically about cross-sectional and longitudinal studies. Module 31 Genetic and environmental influences on intelligence. Heredity and intelligence. Environment and intelligence. Gene-environment interactions. Group differences in intelligence test scores. Little Nate's parents never thought he'd excel in the classroom. They were just being realistic. Their son often seemed bored at school. He was never the smart kid. Nate overwhelmingly preferred sports to studying. Eventually, he became a skilled musician, learning how to sing and to play multiple instruments. College wasn't in Nate's plans. He definitely wanted a music career. Then Nate's father suggested, maybe try a year of college. It can't hurt. So, Nate agreed. To fill his course schedule, Nady registered for Introduction to Psychology. The assigned text, an earlier edition of the very book you're reading now, left him abuzz with excitement. I had no idea you could use science to understand people. Although he did not earn an A, Nady learned something that forever changed his life: hard work and persistence could grow his knowledge. With his new mindset, Nady immersed himself in psychology. He read dozens of psychology books and began to excel in his classes. He gained research experience and attended academic conferences. Nady went on to earn 2 master's degrees and a PhD in psychology and became a professor and one of your authors. Yes, that's correct, Nady, a family nickname, is me Andy. Few topics have sparked more debate than intelligence. Does each of us have an inborn general mental capacity, intelligence? Can we quantify this capacity as a meaningful number? How much does intelligence vary within and between groups, and why? Do beliefs about intelligence, whether it is unchangeable or can grow through experience, influence academic achievement? Modules 29-31 offer answers, by identifying a variety of mental gifts and concluding that the recipe for high achievement blends talent, grit, and life circumstances.